It's JW the Wingman. Today our special guest is Elaine Anton Lotrulio, a licensed social worker, crisis clinician, former NCAA Division I student athlete, and doctoral researcher dedicated to advancing mental health awareness among adolescents, young adults, and athletes. Welcome everybody to Circle Back to You podcast. Happy Wednesday. It's another beautiful day, another beautiful month, y'all. It's July 1st. Can you believe that? I mean, this year is going by so fast. And, we have some wonderful things on the way. And today we have a special guest. I just want to let everybody know that my passion behind mental health and everything that we're doing at Circle of Friends Club, Spirit Link, and our newly formed church, Soul Sanctuary International, is to help people deal with mental health issues like PTSD, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, and now we have a loneliness epidemic. I mean, this is something that is not only happening in the United States, but globally now. And so, when I was in the United States before I relocated here to Columbia, my mother had bipolar depression, and she was also suicidal several times while she was dealing with that. And I had a firsthand view of what that's like and how traumatic that is, watching somebody that you love going through something like that. And, even now, the second leading cause of death right now in the United States is suicide. And homicide is number one. So, ladies and gentlemen, you don't want to wait until it's somebody that's very, very close to you that is suicidal or has committed suicide in order for you to get passionate about this subject and want to help out. So, I'm going to have guests like the one that we have today on our show to bring about more awareness about this subject so that you can also be passionate about this and do something to either give support, be a guest on our show, or maybe even donate to our cause. And so we'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to have a quick word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back. Welcome to the show, Elaine. How you doing today?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. This is a true honor. And it was so nice to meet you just the other day. I mean, we've only had, 2 conversations?
Yeah.
and it's like we're friends already. Welcome
Absolutely.
to the show. Yeah, we're going to get into some deep conversation today. But to start, please introduce yourself and give us some background information about yourself as well.
Okay, great. So I feel like I'm on my maybe third or fourth career. I was an art major in college. I was a women's lacrosse player at a Division I school. And I then got a degree in higher education administration and worked in higher education for about, 10, 12 years. And then I began coaching lacrosse, both out of high school and then eventually in college. But I had the experience where, as a parent, I had a son who struggled, and that was a really challenging time in our lives, my whole family. My son eventually went into treatment, and he's thriving now. And so I'm a firm believer that with the right kind of treatment, people can get better from whatever it is in their mental health that's causing them to struggle. And as a result, I started talking to a lot of other parents whose children were in crisis. They didn't know who to turn to. People just kept giving out my phone number. And I said, well, I'm doing this anyway. I should go back to school. So I returned to school to become a social worker. And then someone told me, an old professor said, you should probably do the PhD too. And I said, all right, okay, I'll do it. So I just finished my 5th year in school. I, along the way, got my social work degree. I've worked in a lot of different environments, in a jail, in a hospital emergency room as a crisis clinician. So I've been in a lot of environments with my work. But what I really, really love is the research I'm doing, which is really a big part of the PhD. You are really producing research, and I've done some research that I'm proud of. Most recently, on April 30th, I published an article with 2 co-authors. It was the study of a cluster of suicides that occurred in the spring of 2022. There were 7 college athletes who died by suicide, and 6 of them occurred within a 66-day period. For me, I felt that was shocking. As a former athlete, as a former college coach, I wanted to find out what happened. And so I traveled the country. I interviewed their parents and siblings. And we wrote about it and made some recommendations. We got to understand what happened, and we created some recommendations for colleges and families and clinicians to maybe consider.
That's wonderful. And okay, I want to backtrack. You told us about your son that had some struggles with his mental health. If you don't mind, if you can go into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
What exactly was he dealing with at the time? And did you see any signs of the things that he was struggling with?
So I'll talk briefly about it because I don't want to speak for him. But I will talk about it from the perspective of a parent. My older son and my younger son were really, really great friends. My younger son had just entered high school in 9th grade, and my older son was a senior, and they were great friends. I think anybody can relate to hanging around their big brother. My older son was really gracious in that way. He was always kind to his younger brother. And then that next school year, my older son went to college across the country in Washington State. And I think it was by September, October, I started to see some things that were unusual, just changes in his appearance, in his personality a little. And one day I walked into his room to open him up for school, and he said, I can't do it. I can't go anymore. And that was like the start of 2 years. I thought I could make him well. I thought that it was a phase, he'll grow out of it, but none of that was true. And it wasn't until, as he's spoken publicly about his experience as well. And as he said, he went through a rock bottom moment of his life that he didn't know was going to come. And, by maybe 2.5 weeks later, he was in treatment for about 15 months.
Oh, wow.
Thankfully, he's
Okay.
really thriving now, and he loves life. And he's really like a miracle. I think he's an inspiration for me, and I just think he's one of the greatest kids I know. And I know a lot of them over the past 35 years of working with young people.
Okay, one question about the change in appearance, because I think probably that's something that, obviously parents see. They don't think there's anything wrong with it, probably. They just think probably it's just a phase that their child is going through. But have you noticed that what happened with your son and the change in his appearance is something that's common that you've seen with other children who have attempted suicide or maybe committed suicide?
So I think one of the things we pay attention to are risk factors. There are some well-established risk factors. It could be, a history of violence or ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, or bullying is a huge one. And I think I read a study yesterday that said that bullying is like a common theme in young people who have suicidal ideation or attempt or die by suicide. Bullying is a big thing. So that wasn't really my son's experience, but I think a lot of times we focus on those risk factors, and that tells us who might be at risk. But we also have to pay attention to when someone might be at risk. There are these precipitating events or negative life events that occur. And they're not always actually negative. They can be just a life transition, like a graduation from college, a big birthday. And you would think, or a new job, and you think, oh, well, that's a great thing, right? That should be.
Right.
But for some people, it's not. It's a challenge for them in some ways. And what I want to say about that also is suicide isn't just one cause. There's not one thing. There might be a precipitating event, but there's a lot that goes on that brings a person to that point where they're in such pain, or what we call psych ache. They're in such pain that they begin to think that suicide is the only way out. They feel trapped. They feel hopeless, and those are feeling trapped and feeling hopeless are two really big things to pay attention to. But so we have to pay attention to when we see changes in behavior. When you think something might be unusual, uncharacteristic, have a conversation.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And along with some of those signs that, parents should pay attention to. And I think, probably one of the resounding things that some of these parents have in common is that they're so busy with their profession, with their job, with their business, that they just don't have time, or they don't make the time, I should say, to have conversations with their children on a regular basis. That's part of it. And have you seen that spirituality has anything to do with the problems that these children are having?
That's hard for me to say. I was at the time my son's faith formation teacher at church, and he was adamant he was not going to go anymore. So that sort of did fall away. But I tried to compensate in other ways. We began working a local soup kitchen together and serving the people in our community. I think it's important that there maybe not be a narrow definition of what faith and spirituality can be. And I think that was a very moving experience for him. And he is a very kind, sensitive, and empathetic person. So I think that it's hard for me to say because faith is different for everyone. It can mean different things to different people, but it's possible. I mean, there are people who say that. And the other thing I want to say is I think parents are all very well-meaning. I didn't know. And
Yeah.
I think, well, good parents pay attention, don't they? But I worked at his school. I was there. Yeah, well, I was the coach at his high school. And
Okay.
I was there. I watched him leave campus, and of course, I was there after school as a coach. But I think parents, hindsight's 2020. As one of the parents in my research study said, your head just doesn't go there. You don't know what it is because you've never experienced it. Your head just doesn't go there. So something that seems after the fact, you see signs.
Yeah.
But while you're in it, you don't always see signs of suicide while you're in it. Of course, you can become educated. I'm also a trainer in 3 suicide prevention programs, and I train as many people as I can because suicide prevention training is like CPR. You can do CPR, and then you hand that person off to a doctor, and they get in the ambulance and they go to the hospital. And that's what suicide prevention training is for everybody. Anyone can prevent a suicide by becoming educated. Now, That's kind of a weird thing to say. I mean, you can learn the skills to prevent suicide. It's a better way to say it.
Okay.
And anyone can do that.
Yes. Okay. So along with the training, I mean, do they say anything about paying attention to the social circle of your children, or any like changes in behavior as far as isolating themselves from the family? Or, I mean, what are some of the things that you learn in the training?
Well, in the training, it's really just about how to give immediate help in a crisis. But I think going back to what I was saying before about bullying, online bullying, I think when it's happening, we don't always see it as something as detrimental, but it has accumulated impact on a young person. And so where social circles are concerned, bullying is a big issue. But I do think that that's what happens. They begin to isolate themselves and distance themselves from their social supports. It definitely has an impact on the social life, especially because a young person who's struggling with suicidal ideation often feels they can't ask for help. They don't think someone will understand, and they're afraid to say that they're struggling, and they don't always trust that someone's going to respond appropriately.
Yeah. And from one of our conversations that we had, I was telling you a situation where, my mother would share some of the dreams that she had. I mean, some really, really hellacious nightmares. And some of those nightmares she told me about, and there's a difference between a nightmare and a night terror.
Yeah.
2 completely different things. A night terror is where you're actually attacked by a demon in a dream. A nightmare, maybe something terrible is happening, but there's no a physical attack or spiritual attack that you can see or feel in the dream. So that's the difference. So, there was a case that you were telling me about. And this young lady, she actually, killed herself. And her father gave you some of the details and talked about a dream that she had. You want to talk about that?
So I'm going to be very cautious about it because I don't want to, again, invade someone's privacy.
Sure.
But there was a distancing. The person was someone who was very connected to their church and their faith. And sometimes when a young person goes off to college in that transition, some of those supports fall away. And as you were saying before, sometimes spirituality, faith, church can be a big part of someone's life. And a distance from that can sometimes be life change someone's perspective, especially when they're struggling with a college transition.
Yeah.
But yes, there was the person in my study did share that that there were some very frightening dreams or nightmares that young person experienced.
Yeah. And so, through the whole situation with my mother, I got into spiritual dream interpretation and found out that, 9 times out of 10, when you ask a person that's dealing with, especially suicidal ideation, that's one of the worst things that you can deal with when it comes to mental health, is that they can't remember their dreams. And if they can, probably it's 9 times out of 10, again, it's some kind of night terror that they're having on a regular basis. And so, waking life is hard enough. And you go to sleep and you have these kinds of dreams. I mean, it's extremely tormenting to the point where you just want to be at peace. And, it's a desperate situation that these children are facing, and they don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, and I don't think that those are things that should be ignored. That if there's these sort of, these unsettling experiences, it doesn't matter if you're awake or asleep, but they should be looked into, explored.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to take a couple of comments from the audience today. Joshua Lee says, "Hi, everyone." Hey, Joshua. Nice to see you, and thank you so much for joining us today. And from Christine Bailey, my good friend, and my, not co-host, but panel guest every morning in our Bible study, which is live stream. She says, "Good afternoon, everyone." Thank you so much for joining us, Christine. We love you. And so you were recently featured in an interview, a TV interview at a news station there in New York where you are. Tell us about that. And we're going to show a video clip from that as well.
Sure.
But sure. Just tell us a little bit about that interview.
Sure. So as I said, I published an article, well, we published an article in the end of April 30th. And, these suicides were very high profile. And so I think there was an interest from the media in trying to understand what happened. There were 2 other authors, and the second author was my research assistant. And I had also been her coach from 7th grade through 11th grade.
Oh, wow.
So I was also her confirmation in church, or confirmation sponsor at church. So we had a nice connection, coach and student athlete. And I left. I moved away just for a short period of time, and she went off to college. She was a Division I athlete, and she had a suicide attempt. And what I mentioned that there were 7 suicides within the spring 2022 semester.
Goodness.
had she died, she would have been number 8. And she talks about that, knowing that she could have been one of those statistics. So our news wanted to kind of do a story on the two of us, our relationship, and how we came back together, and ended up writing this article together. And yeah, she's a pretty remarkable young woman. I adore her, and right now she's at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, getting her degree in social work.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to run that video clip, and we'll be right back.
Got it.
A UAlbany PhD student there recently published their research on student athletes and mental health, examining why student athletes sometimes die by suicide and what colleges and universities can do to help students in crisis. In this morning's Wellness Watch, CBS 6's Lara Bryn is sharing one student's story. And of course, we want to warn you, because this story includes discussion of suicide attempts, it may not be suitable for some.
You wouldn't necessarily know it from looking at these photos of Sophia Burke from a few years ago, but
back in 2022, I was hospitalized from a suicide attempt, and I'm so lucky that I was able to get the help that I needed, and I spent a long time in treatment.
A former lacrosse player at Saratoga High School and then at the University of Vermont, Burke was also struggling with a romantic relationship, alcohol, COVID, depression, anxiety, her lacrosse playing, and ultimately stepped away from the sport.
I was living off campus in a house of 6 other athletes. And yeah, there was kind of this awkward, like, do we reach out to her?
It was around then that Sophia attempted suicide. Elaine Anton Latrulio was her lacrosse coach at Saratoga High School. And as a parent, she too had a lived experience with suicide.
All right. So in that student's particular case, I mean, was it the combination of the transition to college, a Division I athlete, all of the pressure that comes along with that, and then also, the relationship that she was in, and her social circle? What exactly did she give you as the reason?
I like how you're putting that all together, because there's a common phrase that's used in relation to suicide and student athletes. It's called the perfect storm. So relationships, broken relationships, breakups, also not playing. Like if you're not on the field during games, and you really, really, really want to play, it's such a hard experience as an athlete to want to be able to contribute to your team, but maybe your coach has something else in mind. Maybe your coach, maybe there's someone who plays your position better. So sitting the bench, relationship troubles, and there was some alcohol in the mix there. And so that coming together creates what we call, I've heard called a perfect storm. And so I think, that's what Sophia alluded to. I want to also point out something she said. She lived in a house with 6 other girls, and no one knew what to do. And that's why people have to be trained to ask the question, are you okay? Yeah. People are so afraid to say, I've noticed that you have a lot going on right now. Your personality seems to be different. You've been hiding in your room. Are you okay? Are you thinking about killing yourself? And that's the question that people find so hard. Number one reason, I think, is because we think, oh my gosh, if I ask her, then she'll start thinking about suicide. And I can guarantee you, if you're thinking about suicide for her, she might be thinking about it too. And so we can't be afraid to ask the question. Usually when you ask the question and the person is thinking about killing themselves and is very serious about it, it comes as an enormous relief that someone has asked them. A lot of people say, I couldn't ask for help. I couldn't ask. I needed someone to ask me. And so we need to be trained to ask young people or anyone, are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about suicide? Because if you can't say it, how can we expect them to ask for help? If you can't, the words can't come out of your mouth, how is it going to come out of their mouth?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in that case, though, I think it's really, really hard for people to ascertain whether or not that person is having suicidal thoughts, because you can see the depression. I mean, that's obvious. You can see somebody that's depressed, and you can see somebody that's isolating themselves. But to, have maybe like the thought that maybe this person is having suicidal thoughts, that's something completely different from what you can see.
Yeah, and you might want to go in a little softer then. You know the person. In all likelihood, you're not asking for no reason. You're seeing something. And so all you have to do is repeat what you're seeing. I noticed that you're not coming to practice. You're not coming to team events. And you seem to be, in your room a lot. Are you okay? I'm worried about you. It at least opens a dialogue, right? So
right, yeah.
Remember, you're not asking out of the blue. And you're not asking because you're nosy. You're asking because you're noticing something.
Yes. Well, as a parent, especially if your child goes away to school and you don't see them until maybe like a semester break or a vacation or something like that, and they've already made the transition from high school to college, and they've left you for, let's say, 3 or 4 months, and you don't see them again until their break. I mean, how can a parent know unless they haven't heard from their child, and you're used to hearing from your child on a regular basis, and those phone calls stop taking place? I guess, some questions can come about then about what's going on. But what do you do as a parent and your child is away from school?
So I would say that, at least in my experience, the young person may distance themselves, but still remain in communication. They're just they're just not disclosing. They mask how they feel, and they don't disclose the seriousness of their emotions. And so it's not so much that they stop talking, it's that they're not sharing. They might be talking, but they're not sharing how they're feeling. They might just be saying, yeah, I'm okay. And in 2 instances in my research, the athlete had a prior suicide attempt. And my research into laws like HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability Act, a lot of times clinicians think I can't say anything. I can't, if the person says that I can't share this information with their family, then I can't share it with their family. But that's not actually what some of the subsequent clarifications on HIPAA say. HIPAA says, no good faith effort to keep a person safe would be the Office of Civil Rights would not find fault with that clinician. And so I've done a really, really deep dive into these laws, HIPAA and FERPA. FERPA is something that's governed on college campuses. It's the Family Educational Right to Privacy Act. And that's a little different. But if a young person is at risk for suicide, and a prior suicide is a really high risk, that loved ones what we call collateral consultation. Family members should be consulted to find out what's the situation. Do you have any background information about their mental health and well-being that would help us develop a treatment plan for them here on campus? Or it helps you determine what level of care do they need. Sophia said, I needed inpatient treatment, but no one said anything that was an option.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, again, probably then she wouldn't have wanted to give up her sports, but eventually she did. But yeah, I don't think a lack of communication is always, they don't go radio silent. If they do go radio silent and you think that there might be an issue, that would be a concern. But there also may be a concern if they're talking, but you just don't know. That's why there's a lot of hindsight, regret, and guilt, because there are possibly missed warning signs that you don't know because you didn't know what they were, and you don't see them until after, which is terribly, terribly painful for suicide loss survivors. They ask the question, why? Why did this happen? It's a question they ask themselves quite a bit.
Okay, so amongst these students that have committed suicide, have you noticed the commonality of alcohol abuse or drug abuse in those cases?
No. I mean, there are instances where they might be drinking, and of course, Sophia would share her experience with alcohol. But, I mean, the research says that alcohol definitely comes into play quite a bit.
Does it?
Especially if there's sort of a recklessness around that. And that's why I say, if you notice changes, if someone is drinking heavily and you know them to not be a drinker or not a heavy drinker, that's a flag and a cause for concern to ask, hey, I notice you've been drinking a lot lately, and you really, when you're not drinking, you're locked in your room. What's going on? So it's definitely in the work that I have done. It wasn't a major component, but the research says that increased alcohol use. If somebody is already suicidal, alcohol in the mix is very dangerous.
Yeah.
I want to I'm not trying to correct you or call you out, but there's language that we use nowadays to take the stigma and shame away from suicide. And so we don't use the word commit anymore because it's related to committing a crime or committing a sin. And so in an effort to take away the stigma as much as we possibly can, we've moved away from that language, and we just simply say died by suicide or killed themselves. Some people say suicided, but just, that seems awkward to me. But I just say she died by suicide.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you said that because, not too many people know this. And so and what we want to do, like you just said, take the stigma away from it so that, this can be, I'm not going to say commonplace conversation amongst people, but, there definitely needs to be more awareness.
I hope it becomes I hope it does.
Me too.
I mean, there were lots of conversations we never had before about child abuse, sexual abuse, and for the sake of the well-being of people who have experienced those things, we can't step away from that. And you said some statistics. Well, suicide is the second leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-olds. And the suicide rate in the United States is double the homicide rate. We always think that more people are being killed by guns by someone else, but that's not actually the case. More people are killing themselves with the guns than someone else killing someone else. What the statistics say is every 11 minutes in the United States, someone dies by suicide. That's like it's the equivalent of in 2 days, 3 days, that's the equivalent of a jet going, airplane crashing and killing everybody.
Goodness.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, we talk about murders a lot. I get it, it's in the news, but we don't talk about suicide. And of course, there are good reasons to not talk about it all the time or in the news, because it needs to be treated with care and how it's discussed. But it was shocking for me to learn that the suicide rate is double the homicide rate in the United States. And it's, when you think about 15 to 24-year-olds, those are young people. Those are people who should not be dying. They are healthy. And to think that that's the first cause of death for them are accidents. The second cause of death is suicide. I find it, I'll never get used to it. I'll always be shocked by that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so devastating when you hear one of these stories about a student killing themselves. I went to Morehouse College, and I've seen one of those stories at least twice this year already. I mean, it's so tragic, and I'll never forget, like back in 2006, like right before the Super Bowl, Tony Dungy's son, and at the time he was the coach of the Indianapolis Colts, and his son killed himself.
Wow.
And that was the first time that I ever heard of somebody in sports, like one of their children or somebody like that was close to them, kill themselves. So it was a huge story at the time, and I just couldn't get over the fact that he was close to that Super Bowl game and have to share that kind of news.
Yeah, it's devastating.
Yeah.
So I don't know where you are in our conversation, but I wanted to be able to share some risk factors for athletes, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So oftentimes there's academic and athletic pressure. Sometimes it's not one or the other. They can be conflicting. There's pressure coming from the classroom and pressure coming from the field. There's also a toxic team culture. We talked about like bullying or hazing. A toxic team culture, poor relationship with your coach can really, really be detrimental. There's also barriers to accessing services. So an athlete might not have the kind of time another student might, because I know for me, I worked out for 3 hours every day. If I wasn't in season, I was still working out 3 hours a day. And then there aren't always enough clinicians on a college campus. And amazingly, college campuses, even my campus, UAlbany, has been really creative in how they're trying to meet students' needs with the number of clinicians they have. So there's some barriers there to accessing services. And athletes don't always want to talk about it, because if they're afraid that if my coach knows I'm going to a therapist, I'm going to lose my playing time. So they have a good reason they think a good reason to hide it. Also, this complexity of this athlete identity. If I'm not an athlete, then who am I? If I am retiring or I've finished up my eligibility to play, that transition is so challenging for an athlete, that the more we associate ourselves with that athlete identity, the more dramatic that transition experience will be, and it can really affect one's mental health. And so being aware of that is important. And then similar to that is an injury, a career-ending injury, an injury that requires surgery or like more than 9, a long-term rehab thought to be, research shows, thought to be a very challenging experience for an athlete. Again, not being able to play the sport that you have defined yourself by. I know I did. I wanted to go to lacrosse university. I just wanted to play lacrosse. Didn't care where I went. I just wanted to play. And it was a good part of my identity. And so an injury can be so traumatic on physically and emotionally. So those are like unique to athletes.
Absolutely. We have another comment from our audience. And Christine says, I noticed the signs when my daughter started cutting herself, and she would hide it by wearing long clothes in the summer, which was not normal. Maybe that's another sign that parents should be paying attention to is, how is your child dressing? Have you noticed any changes like that in their physical appearance?
Yeah, and very much so. And that was Christine?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Christine. It must have been really hard to go through. It's a helpless feeling, I know, as a parent, to not know what to do. And I hope your daughter is doing well.
Yeah, me too. And so we've come to the close of our conversation for today, Elaine. This has been great. Thank you so much for your courage, your resilience, and everything that you do. We have to have you back.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I could talk, it sounds crazy, but I could talk about, not crazy, but I could talk about suicide forever because I want to be that one person that someone can come to and know they can say anything to me and I won't be surprised.
Well, you have to become part of our Circle of Friends Club. That's going to happen. And also, I have several, ex-athletes, retired athletes in my community that would love to have you on their show as well. So we're going to make that happen. Now, how can they or anyone in our audience get in touch with you?
So I think I gave you my email address. It's eanton@albany.edu. It's the State University of New York. And in the state capital. So please reach out to me. I answer every email. I never say no. Every text message someone sends me, every call, every email, I respond to because I consider it part of my job. So if anything I have said today has made you uncomfortable, has made you sad, or has you thinking, please reach out to me because I always want to be one of those people you can come to when you need to be heard.
Wonderful. And since, I spend the majority of my time on LinkedIn, that's like my second home, my second address.
Me too.
Yeah. Can they reach out to you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. Again, I answer everything. I kind of meet with everyone too. That's how I met you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So Christine says again, she is doing better.
I'm so glad. So glad.
Yes, absolutely. Elaine, thank you so much again for being on the show. We will be back in touch very soon. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be back next week with another phenomenal guest next Wednesday at 4 o'clock Columbia, 5 o'clock Eastern. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, evening, and please be safe this weekend for 4th of July weekend. God bless you. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for watching the Circle Back to You podcast with Jason Wilson, also known as JW the Wingman. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Circle Back to You podcast. See you next week.